William Ernest Henley, a very well-renowned influential editor, critic, and poet who had a major role during the late Victorian period. William Henley went through some rough patches in his lifetime, which only made him and the perception of through which he wrote his poetry stronger and more meaningful. His most famous work of writing was born and inspired by the darkest time of his life. Yet, to this day, Henley is able to inspire through the everlasting beauty of his words. William was born on August 23, 1849 in Gloucester, England. His mother, Mary Morgan, was descendant of the poet and critic Joseph Warton, and William's father, named William Henley, was a bookseller as well as a stationer. William Ernest Henley was the oldest out of 6 children. He had 4 brothers and a sister. William's father died in 1868 when William was only around 19 years old. His father died in poverty, leaving William and his family with debts. Between 1861 and 1867, William Henley attended the Crypt Grammar School in Gloucester. Thomas Edward Browne, a well-known poet and scholar himself, was the headmaster at William's school. Thomas happened to have a very large influence on William Henley. Thomas would not only encourage William to study literature, but also lend him many books. William himself spoke very highly of Thomas Browne, even saying that he was a man of genius, the first I'd ever seen. William also wrote kind things about Browne in his works, The New Review, by saying, "He was singularly kind to me, at a moment when I needed kindness even more than I needed encouragement." It is no doubt that the two had a very good relationship and that William was influenced highly by Thomas Browne. At the very young age of 12, William was diagnosed with tuberculosis of the bone. His left leg had to be amputated below the knee in between the times of 1868 and 1869 due to his illness. This disease brought a lot of extreme pain during the early years of William's life. But even with this, Henley's younger brother Joseph is said to have recalled how William would hop about the room, laughing loudly and playing with zest to pretend he was beyond the reach of pain. This shows from a young age how mentally strong William actually was, and we can see this reflected throughout his future works. In 1873, William's right leg also became infected with the disease. He was admitted to the Edinburgh Royal Infirmary, where innovative treatment from Dr. Joseph Lister spared William's leg. Dr. Joseph used his newly discovered antiseptic surgical method, allowing Henley to keep his leg. William's long stay at the hospital was where he wrote numerous poems detailing his experiences with his illness. During his time at the Edinburgh Infirmary, William met Robert Louis Stevenson. They soon became very close friends and collaborated on pieces of work. It was because of Stevenson's efforts that Henley was able to contribute a number of articles about French literature to the 9th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Robert even modeled what became to be the most famous pirate in literature after William. This was in Robert's work, Treasure Island, where Long John Silver was based on William's appearance and was given a wooden leg. Henley spent time in his hospital writing poems, which were later to be published together under the title In Hospital. He also read a lot and taught himself a number of languages, which include French, German, as well as Spanish. Henley was at last released from Edinburgh in 1875, 3 years after being in the hospital, which were all worth it as he was able to leave with his right leg perfectly fine. In 1878, William Henley married Anna Boyle, the younger sister of a patient whom he had met during his time at the infirmary. They had a daughter in 1888 named Margaret Henley, who sadly passed away at just 6 years of age in 1984. William wrote the world-famous poem Invictus in 1875 and published it in 1888 in his first collection of poems, Book of Verses, under the Life and Death section. The poem inspires people to this day and is a favorite to many influential figures such as Nelson Mandela and Morgan Freeman.
It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
He recited it any time he was feeling down. Reading it gave him everything he needed to keep going and keep pushing. In 1902, Henley fell from a railway carriage. This fall caused the inactive tuberculosis germ to reawaken. He died on 11 July 1903 at the age of 53 and was buried next to his daughter's grave in the churchyard in Cockayne Hatley, a small village in Bedfordshire. His wife was later buried at the same churchyard when she passed. The Victorian period. The period between the years 1837 and 1902 are named after Queen Victoria and is called the Victorian period. This time period was a landmark period for Great Britain. This is because this period brought growth, change, and prosperity into Great Britain, all of which were very much needed. This period is also referred to as the Golden Period in Britain history because it was the peak of Britain. The Victorian era was the time where Britain became rich and powerful. England became the world's most powerful and rich country by ruling over a quarter of the world's population. By doing so, they created a large empire for themselves. There was a large demand for goods such as clothes, food, and necessities alike as a consequence of the more than doubled population. The industrialization of Britain was one of the biggest characteristics of the Victorian period. Factories started being made, which resulted in improvements in living as well as in working standards. The construction of railways replaced traditional means of transportation, such as horse-drawn carriages. Major scientific inventions such as the telephone, railways, sewing machines, and the radio all allowed the quality of life to improve. Architecture and culture also thrived during the Victorian era. Politics were important, and there were spreads of different movements, which included socialism, liberalism, and feminism. The Crystal Palace Great Exhibition was constructed in 1851, where the best innovations of the 19th century were on display. This time period also saw the birth of photography. The first work of photography was of Queen Victoria herself, which made her the first monarch to ever be photographed. Music became immensely popular and brass bands became well known. It was still an unusual idea to record music, as the usual thought that came to mind was of the sound of a brass band being played while people walked free and comfortable through cities and nature. The image of music being recorded and replayed freely didn't come to mind. Another very important characteristic of the period was the advancement in the means of communication as well as transportation, which both resulted from the scientific and technological innovations. Goods were able to be continually transported by steamships and railways, allowing for facilitated trade. Steamships also brought popularity to international travel. Additionally, Britain's economy began to boom as a result of the cinema, telephone, telegraph, cars, and aircrafts. Science progressed rapidly with the use of ether and chloroform as anesthetics, and they were also used for dentist treatments to numb the extreme pain. Other medical advancements were also made, and we can see the effects of these as William Henley was lucky enough to have his right leg spared from amputation as a result of these innovations. While there were countless positive landmarks for the Victorian era, some negative aspects were also present. While wealth increased with the industrialization, poverty also increased exponentially due to the large population increase. Large amounts of unskilled as well as skilled workers had their wages kept at minimum payout. Housing was difficult, which contributed to the development of slums. Child labor in mines and factories was also on the rise, and children as little as 3 years old were put to work for 16 hours daily. This time period had a huge influence from the Protestant work ethic. Society was patriarchal, where men dominated and families were run by the dad. Hard work was seen as to equal success. Religion thrived, but there were debates between science and religion. Women were either portrayed as holy and good or as objects with no middle ground in between the two. However, even with all the negatives in the equation, the positives still conquer, making the Victorian era a very important one. All the advancements and innovations coming into the world improved life quality. The elements and impact of the time period can without a doubt be seen impacting, influencing, and improving William's life. from the day that his family was stuck in poverty to his optimistic attitude through every situation, right up to when he was saved from a second amputation. With this, we can conclude that both William and the Victorian era are very significant fragments of history that will be studied and remembered till the end of time.